Welcome, friends, to the Someone Gets Me podcast. I am your host, Dianne A, and I am so delighted that you're here. This podcast was created because I believe there is a visionary leader inside each one of us who is waiting to be seen. In each episode of Someone Gets Me, you will hear useful tips from successful visionaries who will share their stories about how being seen has allowed them to take their vision out into the world with action. Gifted people at work. These are 5 rules no one explains. Hi, friends. It's Dianne here at Someone Gets Me. And today we're talking about rules in the workplace. Now, many of you have called in and written me and asked questions. Many of my clients ask questions about how to deal with certain situations at work. And there's so many different answers in varied scenarios. But I've also experienced a lot of some of these same things I want to talk about. Now, there's many more than 5 things that nobody tells us about as gifted people at work, but I picked the 5 that come up the most frequently. So if you have a special thing or a special question or something you'd like to ask me about, feel free to make a get to know you call, and I will be happy to help you. Because see, what matters most is that we as neurodivergent people come into our fullness of who we are, that we release the idea that we have to hide or somehow be different. Because the truth is, it is who we are and how our brain functions that is an asset to the world. That's the truth, no matter what we've been told. I think everyone has a magnificent purpose. And for us, it's our processing and our brain functioning. So let's dive into it. The very first question, or very first, I guess I could say rule, comes from a question, comes from a question from several of my clients recently about clarifying questions at work. One person was telling me that he asked some clarifying questions of a supervisor who then started really bullying him and treating him really rudely. Not necessarily in that conversation, but later, right? And a woman I'm working with, she has a similar thing. She's just asking clarifying questions. I know that I myself have had experiences where I ask clarifying questions and I have been met with resistance, upset, being dismissed, being told stupid, things like that. And for a gifted person, asking a clarifying question is vital and important because we want to be clear and specific and correct, right? The general population of people don't necessarily see that way. In fact, clarity is not always rewarded like we think it is. So we might be asking a clarifying question so we can do the best job possible or take on the assignment in its fullness or be able to excel in whatever it is that's happening. Whether it's work or whether it's with family or whether it's in a social setting, we're going to ask those questions. But what happens is not everybody wants to deal with the clarifying questions. And some people don't want to admit that they don't know things. And so if they don't want to admit that, they're going to fight back. So asking clarifying questions can sometimes make others feel uncomfortable. Now, is your question wrong? Is it bad to ask clarifying questions? No, not at all. And I suggest timing. I suggest delivery, timing, and pay attention to the audience. I've been in many work situations where if I had asked the person running the meeting the clarifying question, I would have been met with something that would have been resistance in nature. So rather, what I learned how to do in order to navigate this situation, I would take in the information, I would write down my questions, and then I would go to someone who could hear my questions later and possibly answer them or help me get to an answer. So sometimes we have to learn that the person that we might instinctively want to ask a question to may not be the best audience. It takes a lot of navigating sometimes, but realize that clarity is not always rewarded. Not everybody wants you to be clear, and not everybody wants to answer our questions. But then you say, but Dianne, I have to have the question answered in order to do my best job. I agree. And there's more than one way to get your question answered. And do your best job has different definitions based on where you are. And so sometimes we can want to do our best at something and it's really over the top, or maybe it's not even relevant to what's going on, because remember, these are rules nobody tells us about. So if the clarifying questions are too much, there might be other things that the people around cannot or will not deal with very comfortably. And when we make someone else uncomfortable around us because we're asking questions they may not even understand the words of, right? Then it makes our life harder. So, what I want to encourage you to do is to not shut up completely, but also realize that there's a right time and place to have those clarifying questions answered in any situation, especially at work. The second thing that I want to talk about, this is kind of, this came up so many times in the last month, and that is a phrase that people hear all the time is, we're all like family here, be yourself, let your hair down, do whatever you want. Well, that's not always going to work. That isn't going to work, right? Because what is their definition of we're like family, just be yourself? What is the individual person's definition? What is the company definition? What is the culture around that? And does it even align with any part of your inner self, right? If I was going to let my hair down and just be myself, I would be a little different, maybe in situations, than some other people might expect. Like I remember one time I was in high school, I believe, and we were in a group from the high school going to a theater play at one of the beautiful theaters in Sarasota. And my mom raised us appreciating the theater. And so you wore dressy clothes, like long dresses, and the guys wore suits, and we dressed up to go to the theater because that's what we learned in our family. And that's how we always were. And so then my date goes to pick me up for this event, and he's wearing boots and jeans and a flannel shirt, completely not at all dressed like I am. And so I felt really out of place, and so did he the whole night. We eventually laughed about it, years later, because the funny thing is he's also profoundly gifted. And we never had that conversation then, but I was speaking in a gifted conference much later, and he was in the audience. And so we just laughed about how we were both so off, because really the appropriate dress for this high school function in the theater was somewhere in the middle of what we both did. So just be yourself can make things feel a little cattywampus, right? Can make us a little bit off. Or maybe another thing that happens a lot is the odd sense of humor, or telling jokes in a different way, or the delivery of things. Just be yourself. We're all family here. Some people don't want to be around the energy from their family, right? Like when people say, oh, it's a family organization. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that your family dynamics are going to be in the way of all this, and I got to master all the data points and all the players and what everyone does? Is that just a common colloquial phrase that you're using to tell me it's okay to be comfortable? What does it mean? So a gifted person will overthink about that, will wonder what it all means for hours after it's said, and try to interpret it in different situations and scratching our head, seeing what's going on, right? And so these are things in the workplace no one tells us about. And there's no way really you can ask a clarifying question like, what do you mean just be yourself? Well, they'll say just be yourself. And they don't know what all the possibilities are about what our true selves are. They may not even know what their own possibilities are. So remember that sometimes in work, you're being told or shared, or conversations are happening that are meant to put you at ease and meant to make things smooth and kind of harmonious, right? People to get along. They don't necessarily understand that you're overthinking, data driven, pay attention to everything, hypervigilant brain is doing much more with those few words than they are. So sometimes I ask myself, is the other person or other people in whatever's the situation actually still spending time on that phrase? They've moved on and I'm still wondering what it means. So that means I can move on. It gives me permission to move on. These lines are invisible, right? The boundaries about just be yourself in the workplace are invisible. And nobody really tells you where they are. And a lot of people don't even know where they are, because some people are so restricted that they never touch the boundary. And some people are out there and they're always blowing up the boundary. And so where the actual boundary is and under what circumstances to just be yourself, Where is that? And they're invisible and we're not told. And so if you're neurodivergent and gifted, that feels like a trick question. It feels tricky because I don't know the rules. And then that here comes anxiety, here comes upset, here comes I don't know what to go on. Or the other side, we're really naive to it. Okay, I'll be like my family. And we're naive to the fact that there's invisible boundaries and we keep running into them and having difficulty that way. So it's important to realize that you're going to process those phrases differently. You're going to experience it differently in the workplace than the average rest of the people, unless you're in a workplace where most of the people are gifted. I hope I'm making sense. If you have any questions, do a get to know you call. I'm happy to answer them, or put a note in the show notes, and I'm happy to answer that, because there's so many different little nuances in this, but it's a big theme. It's a big theme, and I'll bet you're already identifying things, aren't you? The third thing that I want to talk about is that gifted people tend to read the room really well. That it doesn't take us very long, whether we're aware of it or not, to know who the actual authority figure is at work, to know who the people go to kind of understand the processes, to see what's going on. And then we're attuned very acutely to any kind of little shift. So if somebody like a supervisor or somebody comes in and their energy is totally different this day than it was another day, then our processing, our looking at all the data points, our paying attention, voice tone, how they walk, what they say, how we're feeling, how they're feeling, whose is it? It goes on and on and on. And we don't always know the answers to all the questions, but we ask all the questions and we pay attention. And because we read the room so well and we see it, we often see shifts and changes in people well before they're going to admit it half the time. And sometimes even before they know it in themselves. I've had it many times over the course of my career where I would go into work and I would feel something and I would go, oh, okay, what's going on here? And my eyes would get big and I'd start asking questions and sharing my feeling or maybe a concern about somebody, and basically was dismissed. Come to find out, all of the things I was picking up on were energetically accurate. Because you're gifted, of course they're accurate. But that doesn't mean the other person's aware of them yet. That doesn't mean the other person wants to admit it yet. And that doesn't even mean that it has to do with that person directly. Because some people might be carrying pain or grief from a family member that's on their mind, and you can feel that. So be aware that there are often energies in the room that you are picking up on, not just the words. So if the words don't match the energy, then that's a red flag for you, isn't it? Yeah. That's where you go, I don't know. And we can start being suspicious, or we can start overthinking. We can stay up at night or make ourselves anxious, or we can go confront a situation that isn't even a situation yet because other people don't know it's a situation yet, because we're ahead of schedule often. So these workplace rules sometimes have invisible lines and boundaries, but also we want to pay attention to the fact that because we're operating in more than one layer at a time, if you will, and we're dancing in between them all, that oftentimes our awareness and our experience is quite different than others. That doesn't make anybody right or wrong, by the way, and it doesn't make anybody special or not special. What it means is be aware of that. Be aware that sometimes I'll say to somebody, what's up? Your energy's changed a little today, or what's up? You're using one word sentences, whatever it is. I never say what's wrong, because it implies something's wrong, and maybe not. Maybe it's just there's something different. Maybe they're just thinking about something. So I don't say what's wrong or imply those heavy things. I just am curious. And if they say nothing, I say, oh, okay, things just feel a little different. I'm just checking in. I just want you to know I care about you, and I move on. I don't try to force it or push it or whatever, because that person cannot unhear me. They can hear that I care about them. They can hear that I notice, because sometimes when it does come into that other person's awareness, they're going to be happy that somebody is paying attention, even though they didn't know it at the time. Another work rule that nobody tells us about is that when you go to a meeting, when you go to a meeting that we think we're taking notes to get information, which on some level we are getting information, just straight out information. And we're writing it down. This is due there. This is the project we're doing here. Make sure you come to this corporate event, whatever it is. And there's a whole nother layer going on in the room, depending on the corporation and the politics and who's in the room. There's a lot of factors here, but often there is more happening in the meeting than just the information. And you, the gifted one, will be able to see and feel all of it when people check in or check out, or who is talking just to hear themselves talk, or making a distraction thing just to, you know, have attention, or telling inappropriate jokes, or maybe being quiet and saying nothing when you can feel there's all kinds of things they want to say. There's all different dynamics here. But a meeting is more than just getting information. It is. It's much more than that. It's about positioning. It's about where the alliances are. Now you have a really great understanding, right? Because you can see it and feel it. I know I can sit in a big meeting, and I've done this before, you know, years ago, and other jobs I had, where I could sit and I could watch the players and the people and feel the energy going, and this person look at that person, and this person go over here, and then suddenly somebody's banging their pencil or their leg is shaking or whatever, and I could notice it all of it. I noticed it. It was crazy. And when I would ask people about it or say something about it, I learned very quickly not to say anything in the meeting, because I would get shut down and made fun of. And that was very painful. So I learned to start going to the people afterwards, because I wanted to know. I cared about people, and I wanted to make sure everything was good for people. And I still got made fun of, or denial right in my face. Like, no, that what didn't happen. And I know it did. And so be careful and be aware that there's more going on in meetings than sometimes we think. Now, that rule is often silent, because there's always different people with different motives and different agendas. And so you can use that one and any of these actually in your favor. You can begin to say, okay, well, what is it that I want to position for in this particular meeting? Is there a creative project or a vision I see, or an alliance that would really serve this team's effort? And maybe I would start planting seeds, or mention it, or reinforce what somebody might say that's related to it. And so you can use it to help yourself bring a better position to the ideas and the energy and data points that you see going on, even if somebody isn't aware of it. But be aware, meetings are not just about taking notes of the information given. That would be an email. That would be an email. You know, I was in a meeting, oh, I don't know, it was a few years ago now. And there was this one person on the team. It was a 20-person team. And there was this one person on the team who always sat behind the person leading the team. And in my worldview, if you're not the leader, you don't sit behind them unless they ask you to, unless it's part of the structure. And it wasn't part of the structure, but this person always did that. And the person leading the meeting kind of poo-pooed me and said, well, I don't know, and it doesn't really matter to them. And I said, well, it's kind of disturbing, because when you're talking, they're making faces or crossing their legs or playing on their phone, and they may be still listening, and it feels disrespectful. And it never changed. So that was fine, as long as I said my truth and I went on. I didn't expect it to change. I just wanted to make sure that I felt heard and understood, that it was odd that somebody would sit behind the person running the meeting and play on their phone and have, you know, minimal participation. So there's all kinds of things, and we want to share them, because in the workplace, no one tells you the rules. I didn't know that we could sit behind or sit anywhere we wanted to. I figured we would sit in respectful ways. I have a different worldview. I have a different way of doing it. And so that's totally fine. You have a different way of doing things. It's totally fine. And be aware that not everybody is as comfortable doing things the way you do things. Not everybody is able to see what you can see. And sometimes we see it first. So we want to make sure that we are paying attention and that we are respecting where other people are, because like I said earlier, a lot of things are invisible. And then the fifth thing I want to talk about is performance at the job, where a lot of times we're taught that the faster you go, the better it is. But we might say if you go too fast, you lose accuracy. But if you try to be really perfectionistic and overly accurate, it might take too long. So there's this beautiful balance between timing, time expected, and how we're going to get our work accomplished in a way that's precise and accurate. Because gifted people like things to be correct and precise and accurate. And we like to do things well. Now, sometimes people go down rabbit holes, and doing it well means taking longer than expected and longer than really is necessary, right? Because the rabbit holes get you. Sometimes we think, oh my God, if I go fast, I'm going to lose accuracy, but accuracy may not be the point of that particular project. So again, there are lines here that I see as kind of moving boundaries that people don't tell you, because most people are not in the neurodivergent category. So most other people, the other 98% of the people, are thinking and processing and ordering their work world very similarly. And then there's us, the outliers. And so we don't want to try to force our way on the other person, but we also don't want to hide our own gifts and ability. But it really matters that we understand that we have a delicate, beautiful, I would call it like a dance, with timing and accuracy and precision and being correct and getting done what's expected of us in a way that's meaningful. I mean, I've worked in mental health and substance abuse for many, many years. And, we have to keep notes and chart on things and write in a certain way. And there's so much to it, and it changes over time, right? Well, one time I was working in a place and there were like lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of work, and more than a person could do. And I even was back then, it was before we even had electronic notes. And so I was writing. My hands hurt, and I was writing all these assessments. And there was no human way that I could finish all the write-ups and do all the assessments in the amount of time allotted. It just wasn't possible. So I'd have to come in the next day and keep writing up what I saw the day before, the people I saw the day before. And sometimes I got 2 days behind, which was, I never wanted to do that. And everybody kept saying, well, just don't make it too long. Just do your best, do your best. Well, my best has a whole lot more precision than what was happening. So I interpreted it as do my best based on the situation, and understand that some things are more important than the others. And the things that aren't necessarily 100% important can be done either later or a little lesser. And so instead of writing long things, I would take the same content and shrink it down a little bit so I wasn't writing as much. And there were different ways to accommodate both the accuracy and timing. And so sometimes, because gifted people are time optimists or have time blindness, we have a hard time sometimes with moderating how much time and how much work and how are we going to play all of this out. And of course, this is a workplace thing that nobody really tells you. They just tell you do a good job. And your idea of a good job is excellence. And maybe the idea corporately of that particular good job is different than you're thinking. So these 5 things and more are different things that we as neurodivergent people are not told about when we get a job or we're in the corporate world. In the workplace, we're expected to know these things and live like everyone else within these same paradigms. But that's not how it works. It's not. The rules are different for everybody. That we are often hidden because people don't always get where we are or what we're doing. We're often judged because we ask clarifying questions, because we want to do a good job, because we have this yearning for justice. That happens. And so allow yourself to realize it's just life happening. Trying to fit in and be in the flow of a corporate workspace can be quite tricky because there's lots of other energies. And you, as a gifted person, are picking up on the feeling and the vibe and the energy. So one of the things I do often is I put my hand on my high heart and I say, how does this land on me? Is the meeting or the person or the situation, how's it landing? And sometimes I put my hand on my high heart in my mind's eye. But I want to know, how is it landing? And then I pay attention to my own experience of whatever is happening. And I trust that. Because believe me, if you have a gut response or you're feeling something in the energy, even if everyone around you is pretending it's not there or denying it, I'll bet you anything what you're picking up is real. And I'll bet you anything that it gets exposed or shown to you in short order. So always know that whatever you're picking up on is valid. Now, how you interpret it, you might want to look at, or what you say or don't say about it, you might want to look at. Those are all different kinds of things. But for now, I just want you to focus on these 5 things, that gifted people have to handle in the workspace. And we're not told about them in advance. We just have to figure them out as we go and then sort out how to do it for each different company. And everyone is a bit different. So if this episode has benefited you in any way, please share it with people. Leave a comment for me. Let me know if I've been helpful at all for you. And of course, you can always do a get to know you call with me. That is totally fine. I love doing those calls. And remember, until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, put your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you, because you are a rock star. You're here on purpose with a mighty purpose. So go out there and let your light shine. And remember, you are beautiful, lovable, and capable. Everything about you is fully equipped and perfectly ready to bring your light out. Until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, this is Dianne saying, be well. Thank you for listening. I trust you gained some valuable inspiration and information. Please join me and other visionaries in the Someone Gets Me Facebook group. Or for more information on my services and additional episode, visit someonegetsme.com. Again, thanks for listening.